Awaken your shadow. The truth sets some people free. It offends everyone else. By Seth, the Red Neo, Cherupak.
Chapter 8. Your Divine Right to Love and Be Loved. Love is not love, which alters when it alteration finds, or bends with the remover to remove. Oh no, it is an ever-fixed mark, that looks on tempests and is never shaken. William Shakespeare, Sonnet 116. The more I think about it, the more I feel that there's nothing more genuinely artistic than to love people. Vincent van Gogh. I do not trust people who don't love themselves and yet tell me, I love you. Bell Hooks. There is no safe investment. To love at all is to be vulnerable. C. S. Lewis, The Four Loves. Part 1. Foundations of the Compassionate Self.
Your compassionate self is your bridge, the living threshold between your inner and outer world, between your divine essence and your embodied expression. It's the part of you that allows the love, empathy, and truth you feel inside to become real to others. When your compassionate self is in shadow, your inner world is a sealed vault, full of hidden treasures that are real to you, but invisible to everyone else. You might have a deep insight during meditation, or a wave of love for someone while driving alone. But when the moment comes to express it, you hold back. The treasure stays buried. To others, you seem cold, unclear, or detached, even though inside you feel vibrant and overflowing. That dissonance is the pain of an unopened vault. When your compassionate self is online, those inner treasures begin to shine outward, taking on form, voice, and resonance that others can experience and respond to. This bridge links the lower three selves, secure, adventurous, and sovereign, with the higher triad, charismatic, intuitive, and transcendent. The first three relate to the seen world, how you stay grounded, how you move, how you choose. The upper three relate to the unseen, how you listen, how you inspire, how you commune with the divine. The compassionate self is the bridge between the three selves from chapters 5 to 7 and the three selves we'll discuss in chapters 9 to 11. It lets your inner experiences and spiritual insight become real, relational, and impactful. It ensures your life doesn't just make sense to you, it makes contact with others. This is the part of you that carries your truth across the bridge between soul and society. It's what lets your love be more than a private feeling. It's how compassion becomes something others can feel through the way you speak, act, and simply exist in a room. Think of the friend who always seems to get it, who knows exactly how to say the thing you didn't know you needed to hear. They're not just insightful, they're transmitting presence. Now think of someone else who's brilliant, but whose words always seem to come out a little sharp or hollow. You know they mean well, but their message never quite lands. The bridge is broken, their inner clarity never makes the crossing. As Jesus said, the kingdom of God is within you, Luke 17:21. But if it stays inside you, unspoken, unshared, unexpressed, it changes nothing. The compassionate self opens the gate between that inner kingdom and the outer world. It's the current that lets heaven touch earth. The Tao Te Ching tells us that the greatest virtue you can have comes from following only the Tao, which takes a form that is intangible and evasive. Even though the Tao is intangible and evasive, we are able to know it exists. Intangible and evasive, yet it has a manifestation. secluded and dark, yet there is a vitality within it. Its vitality is very genuine. Within it we can find order. Since the beginning of time, the Tao has always existed. It is beyond existing and not existing. How do I know where creation comes from? I look inside myself and see it. This passage reveals a foundational truth echoed by the principle of correspondence, that what is within is reflected without, and what remains unmanifest within us will find no order or vitality in the world unless it's expressed. Compassion in this context is the sacred function of bringing that inner vitality into correspondence with the outer world. To withhold that bridge is to sever the flow of creation itself. You know compassion is real. You feel it stir in you, but unless you give it form, it never fulfills its function. Felt but unspoken love turns into frustration. Unexpressed empathy dries up into resentment. Blocked compassion calcifies into judgment. The compassion itself prevents that decay. It gives your internal truth a passage into the world. It helps your words align with your values. Your face reflects your heart. Your presence carries the energy of what you stand for. Compassion is not an emotion. It's a function that translates the compassion inside you into words, actions, and energy that others can experience. That process happens in the body, not just the mind. Specifically, it lives in the ventral vagal system, the branch of your nervous system that governs safe connection, attuned presence, and social engagement. When this system is active, your tone softens, your muscles relax, your voice resonates. You don't have to try to be kind or present, you already are. When the system is offline, everything collapses. You try to listen, but you absorb. You try to stay open, but you freeze or fawn. Your words stumble, or they vanish entirely. Picture yourself in a conflict with your partner. You want to stay calm and listen, but your heart's racing, your face goes blank, or your voice trembles. You nod to keep the peace, but you're no longer present. You're managing your survival. Later, you beat yourself up for not saying what you really felt. That's not a moral failure. It's a signal. It means your nervous system is overwhelmed, and it can be retrained. Before neuroscience gave us language for this, ancient systems had already mapped it. In Ayurveda, the heart houses Sadaka Pitta, which governs emotional integration and aligned action. In Chinese medicine, the heart houses Shen, the spirit that animates the eyes, the tongue, and our capacity to relate with clarity. In Christian mysticism, the heart is where the Holy Spirit communes with human awareness. Across traditions, the heart is more than a pump. It's a portal. When that portal is open, your compassion itself becomes active. You speak the hard truth in a way that builds bridges instead of burning them. You stay emotionally present when someone you care about is spiraling or hurting. You respond to your child, your client, your partner with clarity that doesn't dominate and kindness that doesn't disappear. This is the skill set that lets relationships actually work. It's what lets your secure self offer safety to others. It's what gives your sovereign self a voice that people can receive, not resent. And it's what keeps your adventurous self from becoming reckless or selfish. Most people were never taught this. Instead, you were taught to be agreeable, to be nice, to nod along, to not rock the boat, to tolerate what hurts you in the name of compassion. You learned that keeping the peace is more important than being in integrity. So you smiled when you felt rage. You said yes when your gut said no. And you called it love. Maybe it started young, smiling politely at relatives who crossed your boundaries, saying, "I'm fine," when your feelings were anything but. Or maybe it showed up in the workplace, nodding through meetings while resentment brewed silently beneath. The world rewarded your niceness, but your soul registered the cost. Sometimes, though, what we call a boundary is actually a wall, one built from fear, hypervigilance, or the residue of past harm. We do this when old wounds remain unacknowledged or unprocessed. Instead of placing a clear sign that says, "This is my space," we string electric wire around the entire perimeter. Anyone who even appears to be crossing our boundary is met with attacks, accusations, and threats. We don't give people a chance to see or respect our needs because we never actually express them. We just expect them to know, but no one else was there when your pain was formed. No one else signed up to become an expert in your trauma. They can't navigate your triggers without a map that you refuse to give. In most cases, the person simply walks away, not for lack of love, but through exhaustion in trying to thread a path that we've made it unsafe to walk upon. In others, they self-abandon, trying to navigate the booby traps that guard what should have been a path to establishing mutual trust. This isn't sovereignty. It's what self-protection becomes when it forgets that love requires risk, that trust requires clear, achievable expectations, and that compassion, to be real, must be received as well as given. But compassion is also not blind tolerance. It's not about keeping everyone comfortable. It's about being true in the presence of pain, yours or someone else's. That's why it's so rare and why it's so powerful. The Dhammapada says, hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by love. The Bhagavad Gita tells us, he who is free from malice, who is friendly and compassionate, is dear to me. The Gospel of John writes, perfect love casts out fear, not by avoiding it, but by staying rooted in the face of it. When your compassionate self is active, your presence becomes a transmission, not because you say the right things, but because who you are comes through. People feel safer, truth gets spoken, the room shifts. That's what real compassion does. It doesn't sedate, it transforms. Every relationship you care about runs on this bridge. When it's open, your love is felt, your truth is heard, your influence is honest. When it's blocked, everything distorts. You over-explain, you shut down, you become either invisible or overpowering. Either way, no one gets the real you. And when that happens for too long, when your love is never expressed, when your empathy never lands, it doesn't just go away. It curdles into bitterness, resentment, and rage. You've seen this pattern in others. The nice guy who suddenly explodes over something small, the people pleaser who turns passive-aggressive, the friend who disappears when you need them most, not out of cruelty, but because their suppressed empathy twisted into emotional exhaustion. This is what happens when the bridge collapses under years of silence. It turns into bitterness, martyrdom, or passive-aggressive resentment. That's how wrath enters the system, not as hate, but as love denied a channel. We'll come back to this later. Your compassionate self is what keeps this from happening. It ensures that what lives in you can live through you. It's the bridge, the conduit, the channel. You're not here to hoard truth or perform virtue. You're here to become a channel for the divine pattern through how you listen, how you speak, how you stand in a room, how you sit with someone else's pain. This is the compassionate self. This is the sacred transmitter of your inner intentions in the realm of causes into the external realm of effects. New subheader, the compassionate self in relationships. Your compassionate self is the life force that sustains the living, breathing organism we call a relationship. Whether it's with a partner, a friend, a child, a mentor, or a client, every authentic relationship is more than a connection between two people. It is a third entity, an energetic organism with its own needs, its own seasons, and its own sacred purpose. Most people treat relationships like transactions. If I give this, I should get that. Or they see them as extensions of the self. This person completes me, validates me, reflects me, but neither model honors relational sovereignty. In a healthy bond, neither person is the point. The relationship is. And like any living thing, it doesn't thrive on what it deserves. It thrives on what it needs. And this is where love, for all its beauty and power, can also become dangerous. Not because love is bad, but because it is real. It moves people to their most noble acts and their most destructive ones. Falling into love risks rejection or unrequited longing. Staying in love demands presence, patience, and authorship. Most importantly, it requires clear expectations and grace for the person who is learning your expectations as the relationship unfolds. If you commit to someone expecting them to know and understand all of your needs, past wounds, and the language you use to give and receive those, they will always let you down, and you will see it, not as a failure to learn and grow together, but a betrayal. Leaving love, when it's time, is often the most painful threshold a soul can cross. Love is only safe when you're in it, fully, courageously, with structure around it. That structure is made from commitment, boundaries, and shared vision. Without it, even the purest love turns chaotic. Your compassionate self makes this shift possible. It allows you to see the relationship not as a scoreboard or a therapy project, but as a shared sacred space, a field of energy that both people are responsible for tending. This is not codependency. It is co-creation. It is the conscious act of becoming a steward of the relational field. Every authentic relationship has 5 core needs, not 5 rules, 5 agreements, or 5 virtues. Needs. Just like a child, a garden, or a creative vision, if these needs are neglected, the third entity begins to wither. Number 1, validation. I see you. You matter. You are a sovereign equal. Validation isn't about agreement. It's about recognition. When the compassionate self is active, you don't reduce the other person to a role, parent, child, project, problem. You relate to them as a sovereign being with their own path. You recognize their emotions without having to fix them. You honor their story without rewriting it. Most relational dysfunction stems from this one failure. When someone feels unseen or mischaracterized, they stop showing up as their full self. They either shrink or explode. In romantic partnerships, this shows up as subtle contempt. The husband who treats his wife like an emotional mess. The wife who speaks to her husband like he were a lazy child. The underlying message is the same. You are not my equal. The relationship dies a little more every time this message goes unchallenged. Number 2, excitement. There is energy here, a spark, a reason to stay awake. Every living relationship needs adventure. Not in the form of chaos or constant novelty, but in the form of purposeful aliveness. The third entity needs to feel like it's going somewhere. It has reason to wake up tomorrow. When this need is unmet, the relationship becomes stagnant. Conversations grow dull. Patterns calcify. You stop creating together and start coasting, or worse, coping. The compassionate self keeps the fire alive by inviting risk, curiosity, and play. It doesn't let routine harden into boredom. It says, let's ask better questions. Let's try something new. Let's become students of each other again. In friendships, this might mean starting a shared project. In marriage, it might mean reimagining your spiritual or erotic life. In mentorship, it might mean challenging each other with new ideas. The form doesn't matter, the energy does. Excitement isn't a luxury, it's oxygen for the third entity. Number 3, security. This is a safe place to land. No relationship can thrive in chronic instability. That doesn't mean it's always peaceful, but it does mean the nervous systems involved can rest. Security is the sense that even when things get hard, we stay in the room. We tell the truth. We repair. Security also means boundaries that are clear and compassionate. The relationship doesn't become a dumping ground, nor does it become a cage. It becomes a sanctuary, a place where souls can rest and rise. This is where love must be protected by clarity. A man who says he's a lover, not a fighter, is often neither. True love is fierce in its protection. It defends sacred space. It risks conflict for the sake of clarity. It shows up to hard conversations, not to win, but to preserve what's worth fighting for. Love without structure is sentiment. Love with structure becomes a sanctuary. Number 4, purpose. This connection serves something sacred. Relationships that exist only for comfort die of their own weight. Without a shared purpose, the third entity collapses under the gravity of unmet expectations and vague obligations. The compassionate self helps each person stay attuned to what this relationship is for, not in a transactional sense, but in a transcendent one. Is this connection here to raise children, to steward beauty, to build something together, to heal generational patterns, to model wholeness? Every sacred relationship serves a pattern larger than the sum of its parts. When that purpose is forgotten, relationships devolve into emotional bartering or spiritual bypassing. They start to consume more energy than they generate. Purpose realigns the connection with vision. It reminds both people, we're not just here to feel good, we're here to become who we're called to be, together. Number 5, justice. This relationship must honor fairness, dignity, and mutual responsibility. Love without justice is not compassion, it's indulgence. The third entity, like any living system, requires balance. That doesn't mean symmetry, it means stewardship. Each person carries different weights at different times, but the scales must not stay tilted forever. Justice also means honoring truth even when it's uncomfortable. Compassionate love says, I will not coddle you into smallness, nor will I tolerate your coddling of mine. It demands honesty, integrity, and the courage to name what's not working. When justice is missing, one person starts to disappear, or one person starts to dominate. Either way, the relationship turns toxic. The third entity perishes on the battleground instead of thriving in a mutually guarded sanctuary. Compassion, rightly practiced, prevents this. It ensures that fairness is not sacrificed in the name of peace. These 5 needs, validation, excitement, security, purpose, and justice, are the relational equivalents of air, fire, earth, spirit, and law. The compassionate self is what brings them into being. It is the priest, the gardener, the artist, and the architect of love, not as sentiment, but as sacred stewardship. And like all sacred callings, this one requires discipline. Compassion without clarity turns into martyrdom. Compassion without direction turns into confusion. Compassion without courage turns into codependence. But when integrated with the secure, adventurous, and sovereign selves, the compassionate self becomes unstoppable. It becomes the voice of love that listens without rescuing, speaks without attacking, and stays without controlling. It transforms compassion from a feeling to a function. This is the compassionate self in relationships. This is the steward of the third entity. This is the divine right to love, made real in the everyday rituals of presence, truth, and care. New subheader, the compassionate self and the contract of relationships. Being human means being a steward, not just of your body and your external resources, but also of your relationships with others. Whether you're aware of it or not, whether you accept it or not, you're responsible for the space where connection takes root. This is the 4th of the 7 contracts of incarnation, which says, I will be connected. This contract reflects the soul's agreement to experience love in all its dimensions, to bind oneself to its benefits and its risks. It is the courageous consent to a life of deep interdependence, where growth happens not in isolation, but through the friction and grace of emotional reciprocity. This contract does not guarantee comfort. It guarantees connection in all its beauty, complexity, and demand. Unlike the previous contracts, money, flesh, and time, which govern your relationship with the material world and the self, the contract of relationships calls you into conscious engagement with the relational field itself. This field becomes a third entity, born of the connection between the two people. This entity is alive in the way a flame is, requiring constant tending, oxygen, and presence. It gains strength from the attention and care both people offer. When it's consistently nurtured, it becomes a stable force that supports and uplifts everyone involved. The compassionate self brings all of your inner work into contact with another human being. It lets what's real inside you become real between you. Through tone, timing, and truth, it shapes the space between souls into something safe enough for growth and strong enough for honesty. This is how compassion becomes more than a virtue. It becomes structure, not softness, but stewardship. Honoring this contract means recognizing that a relationship has its own integrity and its own needs. Just as a body needs food and rest, the relational field needs attention, clarity, and care. These needs don't compete with individual desires. They create the conditions where both people can actually thrive. These needs are essential to the people in the relationship and the relationship itself. They include validation, the felt sense that each person matters, that their experiences are seen and honored. This isn't about agreement, it's about acknowledgement. When this need is unmet, it creates a hierarchy. One person becomes the parent and the other the child. Sovereignty collapses and codependence rushes in. Excitement, the spark of shared discovery, joy, and growth. It's not the dopamine-chasing thrill of novelty, but the pulse of aliveness that reminds both people that something meaningful is unfolding here, that the relationship is not stagnant, but alive with possibility. Security, the anchoring sense that each person can rest, trust, and relax into their authenticity without the looming fear of betrayal or abandonment. This isn't about perfection. It's about the presence of steady, mutual care, the safety to repair, the willingness to remain real, purpose, the clarity that this relationship exists not just to exchange affection, but to create something meaningful, a legacy, a mission, a shared impact on the world, something that could not be built alone. Justice, the felt integrity of how love is practiced. It ensures that both people feel respected, heard, and protected. That power is wielded with awareness, not entitlement. That conflict becomes a path to greater truth, not a tactic of avoidance or control. These aren't luxuries. They are the invisible threads that hold a relationship together. When they're neglected, even the most committed couples can begin to feel distant, depleted, or disillusioned. Love becomes maintenance. The connection becomes a routine. And the living field begins to dry out. This is why the compassionate self must become sovereign. It must translate internal empathy into external actions. That means more than being nice. It means learning to speak truth without punishment, to listen without collapsing, to see another's pain without needing to fix or flee. It means learning the rhythms of repair, the dance of attunement, the courage to ask, what does our relationship need right now? Not just what do I want from you? Most people were never taught this. They learned love as either performance or transaction, a trait of comfort, approval, or security. They were told that relationships work when each person meets the other's needs, but real connection grows from tending the space between, not just watering your own roots or demanding the other to bloom, but cultivating the soil, the shared space where both can thrive. A relationship is not a contract between two egos. It's a covenant to serve a shared becoming. When two people prioritize the needs of the relationship, both individuals begin to grow. Needs are acknowledged and met through the larger field they co-create. Each person gives not just to each other, but to the relationship itself, not out of self-abandonment, but out of devotion to their mutual thriving. This is how boundaries become borders that define the conditions for mutual thriving. This is why communication matters. Not to win arguments, but to keep the channel open so that the relationship itself can speak. And this is why compassion matters. Because the moment one person disconnects from the compassionate self, the relationship begins to lose access to its own nervous system, the attuned awareness that keeps love alive. To support this process, some couples or close partners establish regular times for what I call intentional negotiation. Intentional negotiation is a conscious, courageous, structured conversation where the needs of all three parties are honored: person A, person B, and the third entity, the relationship itself. In an intentional negotiation, partners share their truths even when they are messy, uncomfortable, or incomplete. Name their needs clearly without guilt, manipulation, or entitlement. Distinguish personal needs from relational ones and respect the integrity of both. Clarify where responsibilities lie, who owns what, who supports what, and where shared agreements live. Consider the impact on each other and on those influenced by the relationship, children, clients, communities, etc. This process does more than prevent conflict. It makes the unconscious conscious. It takes vague tension and gives it language. It allows intimacy to move from reaction to reflection. When done consistently, it allows the relationship to become a place of active evolution, not passive endurance. True compassion sees the other without fusing with them. It holds space without abandoning truth. It recognizes that the claim of being a lover, not a fighter, is a false dichotomy. Any man who says he is a lover and not a fighter is neither. Real love fights, not to dominate, but to protect, to repair, to preserve what's sacred. The only time love is safe is when you are in it. Falling in love is dangerous because it might not be returned. Leaving love is painful because it cuts a tether once held sacred, but being in love, fully present, fully engaged, is the only place where safety and vitality live side by side. You've seen what happens when this contract is neglected. The couple who says they're doing fine but haven't laughed in months. The friendship that becomes one-sided, where one person gives and the other consumes. The parent who says, "I'd die for my child," but hasn't really listened to them in years. These aren't failures of intention. They are failures to actively care for the relationship itself. To honor the contract of relationships is to become a midwife and caretaker of the third entity. It is a conscious decision to ask what the relationship needs before asking what you want, or what the other person expects. This informs the decision to speak and act over and over from a place of care for the relationship itself. This is the compassionate self in its full expression, the translator of love into language, of empathy into action, and the caretaker of the sacred space between souls. This is your divine right and your practical responsibility. New subheader: the compassionate self and the principle of correspondence. The principle of correspondence is the most widely misunderstood and misquoted of the 7 Hermetic principles. The popular saying, "as above, so below, as below, so above," only captures the superficial shadow of it. Correspondence is a fundamental law that tells us how all levels of reality mirror one another, from the most minute detail to the grandest cosmic scale. It teaches us that the same patterns, dynamics, and truths operate across all planes. It tells us that the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual realms are all expressions of the same patterns of order and movement. Look at your hands. The veins beneath your skin fork and branch like rivers. The patterns that shape your lungs mirror the roots of trees. The spiral of your fingerprint matches the whirl of galaxies and storms. These aren't poetic metaphors, they're anatomical facts. You were designed in the image of the cosmos, not in the mystical sense alone, but in structure, in rhythm, in form. The same geometry that governs your breath also governs hurricanes, sunflowers, and seashells. This is the principle of correspondence. What happens in the small reflects what happens in the great. What is true in the personal echoes in the universal. Ancient builders knew this. which is why temples mirrored the human body and sacred texts whispered of hidden symmetry. Modern scientists, too, have stumbled into the pattern. The Fibonacci sequence, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, appears in the coil of DNA, the curve of a nautilus shell, and the arc of a galaxy. The Mandelbrot set, a famous fractal, reveals how endless complexity arises from a single simple formula, repeating itself at scale after scale. These aren't side notes in nature's design, they're the blueprint. And that blueprint is woven into everything, from the atoms in your cells to the orbits of planets, from the pattern of your relationships to the emotional tone of your voice. Jesus gave language to this law when he said, "Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven." This wasn't just a plea for divine intervention, it was an invitation to alignment. Heaven isn't far away, it's the template. Earth is the expression. When you live in alignment with your compassionate self, when you act, speak, and love from that place, you bring that higher pattern into your everyday life. You become the channel through which heaven flows into form, and nowhere is that more visible than in your relationships. The way you speak, the way you listen, the way you hold another's heart in your hands, all of it becomes a living echo of the realm you're tuned to. You can see this pattern echoed in the places built to hold the sacred. Cathedrals, mosques, and temples weren't designed at random. Their proportions often mirror the human body. Their geometry reflects the ratios found in music, light, and living things. These spaces were never just artistic, they were engineered to resonate. You walked into them not to escape the world, but to remember how it's ordered. Their symmetry aligned your nervous system with something higher. Their arches and altars were teaching you, without words, how the divine structure of heaven could be felt on earth, and how you too were part of that design. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This reveals how, through correspondence, our buried shadow selves express themselves through our conscious thoughts, actions, and energy. The parts of yourself that you disown don't disappear. They show up in your tone of voice, your jealousies, your reactivity, the way you interpret silence. You may find yourself picking the same kind of partner over and over, or blowing up when someone gets too close. That isn't fate, it's a feedback loop. The unresolved parts of your psyche cast shadows onto everything you touch. And when you haven't yet learned how to meet yourself with compassion, you'll demand that others do it for you. Or worse, you'll punish them for failing to. The principle of correspondence shows up in your thought patterns, the chemical and electrical states of your nervous system, which we call emotions, and the functions of your body. The same forking structure that shapes tree roots, lightning bolts, and riverbeds also forms your lungs, blood vessels, and neurons. The spirals found in galaxies reappear in your fingerprints and in the cochlea of your ear. These are not poetic curiosities. They are structural echoes of a deeper design. You weren't dropped into a universe that's separate from you. You are composed of it. Every time you breathe, grow, or rest, you're participating in a pattern that stretches across time and space. And when your inner life aligns with that pattern through honesty, compassion, and coherence, it begins to show up everywhere. In your relationships, your decisions, even your calendar. Your life starts to reflect the rhythm you carry. You are not like the universe, you are the universe encoded into flesh. This is why the compassionate self matters so much. It doesn't just help you feel better, it calibrates you to truth. It brings the internal world into coherence, so your external life begins to reflect that order. When you're grounded in compassion, not performance, not pretense, but real integrated compassion, people around you can feel it. They breathe easier, they open up. They respond to the signal you're broadcasting without even knowing why. You're not trying to influence them. You're not managing optics. You're emanating alignment. And that alignment creates shifts, not through force, but through structure. Jesus once said, "He who is faithful in very little is faithful also in much." Luke 16:10. People often hear this as a moral exam, but it's also a map of correspondence. The way you speak to your dog, the way you handle a missed call, the way you set the table, these aren't side notes to your spiritual life. They're holographic snapshots of how you approach trust, truth, and love at every scale. If your calendar is in chaos, your communication probably is too. If you're impatient at stoplights, chances are you're impatient with your partner. Nothing exists in isolation. Everything is fractal. The Golden Rule reveals this as well. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That isn't just moral advice. It's a diagnostic. It tells you where you're out of resonance. If you're constantly guarded around others, check how you relate to yourself. If you find yourself people-pleasing, ask what internal approval you've withheld. Jesus teaches how the principle of correspondence shows up in relationships when he says, "With the measure you use, it will be measured to you." Luke 6:38. What you attract is a reflection of what's inside you. The tone you send out is the tone that finds its way back to you. That's not superstition, it's correspondence. Your nervous system is where the principle of correspondence takes root in the body. When your ventral vagal system is active, the part that governs calm, connection, and regulation, it creates an internal environment of safety, and that safety radiates. People sense it in the softness of your gaze, the steadiness of your voice, the way your presence doesn't spike or withdraw. Your inner coherence creates a field that allows others to rest. This is the heart of somatic practice, not just emotional soothing, but energetic tuning. You're aligning your inner state with a deeper order, so your outer world begins to echo that clarity. The compassionate self is the transmitter. It expresses internal harmony through care, attunement, and responsiveness. You don't need to control your environment when your presence is ordered. Your presence becomes the structure that shifts it. Jesus said, "Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks." Luke 6:45. The meaning is clear. What's alive inside you doesn't stay hidden. It becomes posture. It becomes tone. It becomes how you pause, how you touch, how you respond to silence. People feel what lives in you, even before you say a word. They read the pattern before they hear the sentence. That's why real healing often begins with disruption. When you face the truth, speak the grief, or release what's been buried, things around you start to fall apart. Not because you're failing, but because your frequency no longer matches what you built in survival. Relationships recalibrate. Environments shift. Habits fall away. You're not unraveling. You're repatterning. And the new structure begins with how you carry yourself through the storm. Imagine standing next to someone humming a note that matches your own. You feel it, not just as sound, but as resonance. There's a subtle warmth, a sense of connection, like you've been tuned to the same frequency. Now picture a note just slightly off pitch. Not enough to name, but enough to unsettle. Something in your chest tightens. You don't know why. What you're feeling is an invisible, mathematically measurable energy pattern that musicians call dissonance. This is a metaphor for the effect your presence has on others. It either aligns or disrupts, and it has less to do with your words than with the energetic tone underneath them. Take a look at a fern, a snowflake, or the delicate veins in a leaf. Now glance at your own hand, the branches of your veins, the folds of your skin. The same patterns echo across forms. These are called fractals, structures that repeat at every level of scale. You'll find them in riverbeds, lightning bolts, bronchial tubes, coral reefs, galaxies, and capillaries. It's not poetry, it's design. Nature speaks one visual language. Form follows pattern, and the pattern flows from the same source, whether it's shaping stars or shaping your breath. This is the principle of correspondence. The geometry that builds cathedrals builds neurons. The ratios found in your earlobe are echoed in hurricanes. The architecture of coral mirrors the shape of economies and families. Your inner world doesn't exist in isolation. It's part of a much larger field of order. When you live in alignment with it, the external structures of your life begin to match the internal rhythm you carry. Rooms feel different. Conversations shift. What no longer resonates falls away, not through force, but through dissonance. That's why clarity isn't just a spiritual idea. It's a structural one. When you begin to live in coherence, everything adjusts. The way you organize your schedule, the way you respond to conflict, the way you move through space, your external world starts to mirror your internal thoughts and feelings. When you realize this, you stop chasing external change. You begin carrying a different internal frequency, and your world in time becomes a reflection of that signal. And think of a conversation that left you strangely exhausted. The words were polite, maybe even kind, but something beneath them buzzed with static. A subtle tension you couldn't quite name, like a note slightly out of tune, humming just beneath your awareness. You walked away depleted, not from the words themselves, but from the dissonance they carried. The energetic undertone of your words speaks just as loud as the words themselves. We've been trained to evaluate others by their appearance, tone, or choice of words, but real connection, or the lack of it, lives in the subtler signals. A person might nod along while you're speaking, but their posture tells you they've checked out. Their silence feels sharp, not soft. Something in you tightens before you even know why, and that's what breaks trust. Not disagreement, but incoherence between someone's presence and their performance. The compassionate self doesn't fix this by trying harder to please. It brings your entire system into alignment. Your voice, your body, your emotions, and your intent all begin playing the same song. That kind of coherence is rare, and when people feel it, they soften. They feel safe. Something in their own system unclenches. Polyvagal theory gives us language for this. When your ventral vagal system is engaged, the part responsible for social safety and connection, your body shifts, your eyes warm, your face softens, your voice finds rhythm. These aren't tricks you learn. They're what rise naturally when you're in internal alignment. People sense this the same way children do. They don't need proof. They feel it. You've seen both sides of this. Someone who smiles but their eyes betray irritation, or someone who barely says a word, yet you feel completely held in their presence. That's correspondence. That's the shape your inner world takes as it moves into form. This isn't a metaphor. It's how relationships actually work. Your nervous system is constantly transmitting. When your compassionate self is fully online, the signal becomes clear, clean. You stop contradicting yourself. You stop emitting static. Others feel that and they rest because your frequency is stable and steady. It's the same reason some spaces feel peaceful the moment you walk in, while others feel charged or heavy without a word being spoken. Rooms carry residue. The lighting, the placement of objects, even the scent, all of it mirrors the nervous systems that shape them. Your home reflects your inner world. So does your calendar. So does the way you text back. These aren't just habits. They're frequencies made visible. People spend years trying to fix the outside of their lives, switching jobs, cities, partners, thinking the change will create peace. But the outer world only mirrors the inner one. If the pattern in you hasn't shifted, it just reappears with a different face in a different city, under a different name. The work isn't rearranging your life. The work is retuning your signal. The compassionate self doesn't chase outcomes or manage impressions. It attunes the instrument. It steadies the tone of your presence, how you speak, how you walk into a room, how you listen when no one's watching. That coherence doesn't demand trust. It creates it. You don't manipulate the echo. You become the sound worth repeating. When Jesus taught his disciples to pray, "On earth as it is in heaven," he He was teaching them that the outcomes we observe in the material world are expressions of causal patterns at work in the spiritual world. When he said the kingdom of heaven is within you, he was teaching them that their internal world was the realm of true creation of causes. Heaven isn't a distant place, it's a blueprint, and your life is the canvas where it's meant to unfold. You can see this design written into your very body. The spiral in your fingerprint echoes the swirl of a hurricane. The branches of your veins mirror the delta of rivers. The same geometry that forms coral reefs shapes your lungs. These aren't poetic coincidences, they're anatomical truths. As above, so below wasn't a metaphor to the mystics who spoke it. It was an observation. And before science gave these patterns names, our ancestors lived by them. They didn't believe in correspondence. They breathed it. A storm wasn't bad weather. It was guidance. A flood wasn't chaos. It was a recalibration. The stars weren't decorations. They were messengers. Their rituals weren't superstition. They were synchronization. They didn't view the cosmos as separate. They saw themselves inside it, as part of its pulse, its breath, its unfolding will. This law lives in relationships too. Want to build trust? Speak the truth before it's convenient. Want to be seen? Stop hiding. Want beauty? Make space for it. On your desk, in your day, in your words. Correspondence isn't a theory, it's a feedback loop. You bring coherence to the small and it starts appearing in the large. Jesus' final recorded prayer echoes this law again. That they may all be one, Father, just as you are in me and I am in you. John 17:21. He wasn't calling for agreement, he was pointing to resonance. The unity of spirit isn't uniformity, it's alignment. It's the same pattern of oneness, scaled across the many. He didn't ask God to make it happen, he named it as already true, and then called us to live like it. Ralph Waldo Emerson pointed to this same law in his essay History, writing, "There is one mind common to all individual men. Every man is an inlet to the same and to all of the same." To him, truth wasn't invented by the individual, it was received. When you're aligned with the deeper pattern of life, what flows through you isn't personal opinion, it's insight. You become an instrument, not of ego, but of coherence, like a tuning fork vibrating with the same frequency that constructed the universe. Your thoughts, your speech, even your silence begin to carry a signal that others can feel. This is the soul of correspondence. You're no longer trying to sound wise or gain approval. You're resonating with what's already true, and in that resonance, others hear it too. This is how the world shifts, not by force, not by demanding change, but by becoming so tuned to the source that everything around you responds. That's the signal, that's the work, and you already feel the call. Your inner longings are the seeds of the life that wants to manifest through you and around you.
End of Chapter 8, Part 1 of Awaken Your Shadow by Seth Cherapak.